The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the quiet suburban neighborhood of Oakwood Heights. 16-year-old Maya Johnson walked briskly down the sidewalk, her backpack slung over one shoulder and her earbuds in, humming along to her favorite playlist. She had just left her best friend's house after study session, her mind still buzzing with equations and essay ideas. Honors classes weren't easy, but Maya thrived on the challenge. She was determined to make her father proud. As she turned the corner onto Maple Street, the faint wail of a siren pierced the air. Maya glanced over her shoulder and saw a police cruiser rolling slowly behind her. She paused, pulling out one earbud, and stepped to the side to let the car pass. But the cruiser didn't drive by. Instead, it came to a stop beside her. The passenger side window rolled down, revealing a stern-faced officer with a buzz cut and a tight jaw. His name tag read Bradshaw. "Hey, you," he barked, his voice sharp. "Come here." Maya's heart skipped a beat. She hesitated, clutching her backpack strap. "Me?" "Yes, you," Bradshaw snapped, stepping out of the car. His hand rested on the holster of his gun, a gesture that sent a chill down Maya's spine. "Where are you coming from?" "My friend's house," Maya replied, her voice steady despite the unease creeping into her chest. "We were studying." Bradshaw's eyes narrowed as he looked her up and down. "Studying, huh? You sure about that?" Maya frowned. "Yes, sir. I can give you her address if you—" "Save it," he interrupted. "We got a report of a stolen car in this area. You match the description of the suspect." Maya's stomach dropped. "What? No, I didn't steal anything. I've been at my friend's house all afternoon. You can call her parents, they'll tell you." "Hands where I can see them," Bradshaw ordered, cutting her off again. He stepped closer, his tone leaving no room for argument. Maya's hands trembled as she raised them, her mind racing. This couldn't be happening. Not to her. She was a straight-A student, a volunteer at the local community center, a kid who followed the rules. But as Bradshaw grabbed her wrists and slapped cold metal cuffs around them, the reality sank in. "You're making a mistake," Maya said, her voice cracking. "I didn't do anything wrong." Bradshaw ignored her, reciting her Miranda rights, as he guided her into the back of the cruiser. Neighbors had begun to gather on their porches, watching the scene unfold with a mix of curiosity and concern. One woman stepped forward, her phone in hand. "Officer, she's just a kid," the woman said. "Are you sure you've got the right person?" Bradshaw shot her a glare. "Stay out of this, ma'am. This is police business." Maya's eyes welled with tears as the cruiser door slammed shut, trapping her in the suffocating silence of the back seat. She stared out the window, her mind a whirlwind of fear and disbelief. How could this be happening? And where was her dad when she needed him most? As the cruiser pulled away, Maya clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. She didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. The wheels of injustice had been set in motion, and the truth, her truth, was about to shake the very foundation of Oakwood Heights. Marcus Johnson sat in a dimly lit briefing room at Langley, Virginia, his sharp eyes scanning the classified documents spread across the table. The mission was high stakes. An international arms dealer had been spotted in Eastern Europe, and Marcus's team was tasked with tracking him down. As a seasoned CIA operative, Marcus had seen it all: betrayals, close calls, and moments that tested his resolve. But nothing had prepared him for the call that was about to come. His phone buzzed softly on the table, breaking his concentration. He glanced at the screen, expecting it to be his daughter, Maya, checking in as she always did after school. But the number was unfamiliar. He answered, his voice low and steady. "Johnson." "Mr. Johnson, this is Officer Daniels from the Oakwood Heights Police Department," the voice on the other end said. "There's been an incident involving your daughter, Maya." Marcus's stomach tightened. "What kind of incident?" "She's been arrested, sir. We need you to come down to the station as soon as possible." The words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. Maya? Arrested? It didn't make sense. She was a good kid, smart, responsible, and kind. He quickly gathered his things, his mind racing as he exited the briefing room. As he drove toward Oakwood Heights, memories of Maya flooded his mind. He remembered the day she was born, her tiny fingers wrapping around his thumb. He remembered her first day of school, her backpack almost as big as she was, and he remembered the countless times he'd reassured her that no matter what, he would always protect her. But protecting her had never been easy. As a black man in a world that often judged him by the color of his skin, Marcus had faced his share of challenges. He'd worked twice as hard to prove himself, first in the military and then in the CIA. He'd kept his work a secret from Maya, not wanting to burden her with the dangers he faced. But now, as he sped toward the police station, he wondered if he'd made a mistake. Had he shielded her too much? Had he failed to prepare her for the harsh realities of the world? When Marcus arrived at the station, he was met with a wall of bureaucracy. The desk sergeant, a middle-aged man with a bored expression, barely looked up as Marcus approached. "I'm here to see my daughter, Maya Johnson," Marcus said, his voice calm but firm. The sergeant sighed, as if this were just another inconvenience in his day. "Take a seat. Someone will be with you shortly." Marcus didn't sit. He stood tall, his presence commanding attention. "I'm not waiting. My daughter is a minor, and I want to see her now." The sergeant glanced up, finally taking in Marcus's imposing figure. There was something in Marcus's eyes, a quiet intensity that made the sergeant uneasy. He picked up the phone and muttered something into the receiver. A few minutes later, Officer Bradshaw appeared, his expression smug. "You must be the father," he said, looking Marcus up and down. Marcus met his gaze, his voice steady. "Where's my daughter?" Bradshaw crossed his arms. "She's in holding. We've got her on suspicion of grand theft auto. She's not going anywhere until we sort this out." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. "You've got the wrong person. My daughter doesn't steal. Let me see her." Bradshaw smirked. "You can see her when we're done processing her. Now, if you'll excuse me." Marcus stepped forward, cutting him off. "You listen to me," he said, his voice low but filled with authority. "I'm not leaving without my daughter. And if you've so much as laid a finger on her, you're going to regret it." Bradshaw's smirk faltered, but he quickly recovered. "You threatening me, Mr. Johnson?" Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out his CIA credentials, holding them up for Bradshaw to see. "No," he said, his voice ice-cold. "I'm informing you." Bradshaw's eyes widened as he stared at the badge. For the first time, his confidence wavered. The game had just changed. The air in the police station grew thick with tension as Marcus Johnson stood in the middle of the room, his CIA credentials gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Officer Bradshaw's smug demeanor cracked, his eyes darting between the badge and Marcus's steely gaze. The desk sergeant, sensing the shift in power, quickly picked up the phone and muttered something urgent into the receiver. "I want to see my daughter," Marcus repeated, his voice calm but unyielding. "Now." Bradshaw hesitated, his bravado slipping. "She's in holding," he said, his tone less confident now. "We're still processing her." Marcus took a step closer, his presence towering. "Processing her for what? A crime she didn't commit? You have no evidence, no witnesses, and no right to hold her. Let her go." Before Bradshaw could respond, a door at the end of the hallway swung open, and a tall, broad-shouldered man in a suit stepped out. His nameplate identified him as Lieutenant Harris, the station supervisor. He approached Marcus with a measured pace, his expression a mix of curiosity and caution. "Mr. Johnson," Harris said, extending a hand, "I'm Lieutenant Harris. I understand you have some concerns about your daughter's arrest." Marcus ignored the handshake, his eyes never leaving Harris's. "My daughter is innocent. She's 16 years old, an honor student, and she's never been in trouble a day in her life. This arrest is a mistake, and I intend to prove it." Harris glanced at Bradshaw, who shifted uncomfortably under his supervisor's scrutiny. "Officer Bradshaw, what's the basis for this arrest?" Bradshaw cleared his throat, his confidence wavering. "We had a report of a stolen vehicle in the area. The suspect matched her description." "What description?" Marcus interjected. "A black girl in a hoodie? That's not a description, that's a stereotype. Where's your evidence? Where's the stolen car?" Bradshaw opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. Harris sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Mr. Johnson, let's not make this more difficult than it needs to be. If there's been a misunderstanding, we'll sort it out. But you need to let us do our jobs. Your job? Marcus's voice rose, cutting through the room like a blade. Your job is to protect and serve, not to harass innocent kids because of the color of their skin. I've spent my career fighting for justice, and I'm not about to let you railroad my daughter. Harris held up a hand, trying to defuse the situation. All right, let's take a step back. Officer Bradshaw, bring the girl out. Mr. Johnson, you can see her, but we need to handle this by the book. Marcus nodded, his jaw clenched. A few minutes later, Maya emerged from the holding area, her face pale and her eyes red from crying. When she saw her father, she ran to him, burying her face in his chest. Dad, I didn't do anything, she whispered, her voice trembling. I swear I didn't. Marcus held her tightly, his heart breaking at the fear in her voice. I know, baby. I know. I'm here now, and I'm going to fix this. He turned to Harris, his expression hardening. You're going to release her, and you're going to do it now. If you don't, I'll make sure every news outlet in the country knows how this department treats innocent kids. Harris exchanged a glance with Bradshaw, then nodded reluctantly. All right, she's free to go. But this isn't over, Mr. Johnson. We'll be in touch. Marcus didn't respond. He guided Maya toward the exit, his arm around her shoulders. As they stepped out into the cool night air, Maya looked up at him, her eyes filled with questions. Dad, she said softly, what's going to happen now? Marcus looked down at her, his expression softening. Now, he said, we fight back. The hook was set, the battle lines were drawn, and Marcus Johnson was ready to take on the system that had failed his daughter. The morning sun cast long shadows over Oakwood Heights as Marcus Johnson sat at his kitchen table, a steaming cup of coffee in one hand and a stack of files in the other. Maya, still shaken from the previous night's ordeal, sat across from him, her hands wrapped around her own mug. She hadn't slept much, and the dark circles under her eyes mirrored the weight of the injustice she'd endured. Dad, Maya said, quietly breaking the silence, what are we going to do? Marcus looked up, his expression a mix of determination and reassurance. We're going to fight, Maya, but first we need evidence. I've already called in a few favors. By the end of the day, we'll know everything there is to know about Officer Bradshaw. Maya nodded, though her brow remained furrowed. What if they try to cover it up? What if no one believes us? Marcus reached across the table, placing a hand over hers. They can try, but they won't succeed. I've spent my career uncovering the truth, and I'm not about to let them hide it now. By midday, Marcus's contacts had delivered. A dossier on Bradshaw's history landed in his inbox, revealing a pattern of misconduct that sent a chill down his spine. Bradshaw had been reprimanded multiple times for racial profiling, excessive force, and falsifying reports. Each incident had been swept under the rug, buried by a system that protected its own. Marcus wasted no time. He called a press conference, inviting local media to his home. Reporters arrived in droves, their cameras and microphones at the ready. Standing on his front porch with Maya by his side, Marcus addressed the crowd, his voice steady but impassioned. Last night, my daughter, Maya Johnson, was wrongfully arrested by Officer Bradshaw of the Oakwood Heights Police Department. He began. She was accused of a crime she didn't commit, targeted solely because of the color of her skin. But this isn't just about Maya. This is about a system that allows officers like Bradshaw to operate with impunity, terrorizing innocent people without consequence. He held up the dossier, the pages fluttering in the breeze. This is Officer Bradshaw's record, a record of racism, abuse, and corruption. And this, he paused, holding up a USB drive, is security footage from the neighborhood where Maya was arrested. It proves her innocence and exposes Bradshaw's lies. The crowd erupted in murmurs, cameras flashing as reporters jostled for a better angle. Marcus handed the USB drive to a trusted journalist who plugged it into a laptop and projected the footage onto a screen. The video showed Maya walking calmly down the street, her backpack slung over her shoulder, moments before Bradshaw approached her. There was no stolen car, no suspicious activity, just a teenage girl on her way home. As the footage played, Marcus turned back to the crowd. "This is the truth. And the truth doesn't just set my daughter free, it exposes the rot within this system. I'm calling for a full investigation into Officer Bradshaw and the Oakwood Heights Police Department. And I'm calling on this community to stand with us, to demand accountability and justice." The press conference ended with a flurry of questions, but Marcus had said all he needed to say. By evening, the story was everywhere: local news, social media, even national outlets. The hashtag Justice for Maya began trending, and protests erupted outside the police station. Inside the station, Bradshaw sat in the break room, his face pale as he scrolled through the headlines on his phone. His hands trembled, and for the first time in his career, he felt the walls closing in. The truth was out, and there was no going back. The hook was set. The battle for justice had begun, and Marcus Johnson was just getting started. The Oakwood Heights Police Department was in chaos. Protesters filled the streets outside, their chants of no justice, no peace, echoing off the building's brick walls. Inside, Officer Bradshaw sat in the chief's office, his career hanging by a thread. The chief, a grizzled man with decades of experience, paced the room, his face red with anger. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" the chief barked, slamming a copy of the morning's headlines onto the desk. "This isn't just about you anymore. This department is under a microscope, and it's all because of your incompetence." Bradshaw opened his mouth to defend himself, but the chief cut him off. "Save it. You're suspended, effective immediately. And if the investigation goes the way I think it will, you'll be lucky to keep your pension." Outside, Marcus Johnson stood at the center of the protest, his arm around Maya's shoulders. The crowd parted as he stepped onto a makeshift stage, a microphone in hand. The sea of faces, black, white, young, old, looked to him with hope and determination. "Thank you all for being here today," Marcus began, his voice carrying over the crowd. "This isn't just about my daughter. This is about every person who's ever been targeted, harassed, or wronged by a system that's supposed to protect them. Today, we take a stand. Today, we demand change." The crowd erupted in cheers, their energy electric. Maya stepped forward, her voice trembling but strong. "I'm just a kid," she said, "but what happened to me could happen to anyone. We can't let this keep happening. We have to fight for justice, not just for me, but for everyone." Her words struck a chord, and the crowd roared in support. Marcus took the microphone again, his tone shifting from impassioned to resolute. "We've already taken the first step. Officer Bradshaw has been suspended, and an independent investigation is underway. But this is just the beginning. We need systemic change, better training, accountability, and transparency. And we won't stop until we get it." As the protest continued, news broke that the district attorney had opened a formal investigation into Bradshaw's conduct. Body camera footage from the arrest, previously missing, had mysteriously surfaced, corroborating Marcus's claims. The footage showed Bradshaw aggressively confronting Maya, ignoring her protests of innocence, and mocking her when she asked for her father. The public outcry was immediate. Politicians called for police reform, and community leaders organized town halls to address racial bias in law enforcement. Marcus, leveraging his CIA connections and newfound platform, became a leading voice in the movement. He partnered with activists, lawyers, and lawmakers to draft legislation aimed at holding officers accountable for misconduct. Weeks later, Bradshaw was formally charged with falsifying police reports, racial profiling, and abuse of authority. His trial became a national spectacle, a symbol of the broader fight for justice. Maya, though still healing from the trauma, found strength in the support of her community. She joined her father at rallies and speeches, her voice a powerful reminder of the human cost of injustice. The story ended where it began, on the streets of Oakwood Heights. But this time, the mood was different. Hope had replaced fear, and unity had replaced division. Marcus and Maya stood together at a community rally, their hands raised in solidarity with the crowd. "This is just the beginning," Marcus said, his voice steady and strong. "The fight for justice doesn't end here. But as long as we stand together, we can build a future where no one has to go through what my daughter did. A future where justice isn't just a word, it's a promise." The crowd erupted in applause, their cheers echoing into the night. The hook was set, the battle won, but the war for justice raged on. And Marcus and Maya Johnson were ready to lead the charge.